Are we what our brain does, or are we something else? So, what I have noticed in most people, and I've noticed myself quite often, is that we seem to not really understand the agency that we have within our own minds and with our mind's connection to the actions that we perform, whether it be a reaction to the emotions that we feel or the behavior that we partake in just in the world in general. I feel like, and I see this often, that most people, they'll often say, my brain, I don't know what's wrong with my brain, I did this, or my brain is so ADD, or my brain is so sporadic, or OCD, even in checking things. And I do this as well, where I'll just check a door, I'll check a lock, I'll check the faucet, time and time again. And I know I'm doing it. I step back from myself and I see myself doing it, and I tell myself, I know that this door was locked. I know that this faucet was off. This is my OCD. It feels like that the vast majority of people think that their brain is separate from them. That whatever their brain is thinking or whatever they do in response to various external stimuli or situations is something that's completely separate from any form of agency or any form of self-control. And we tend to romanticize, freedom and acting from the heart, or being a heart-led person, not being completely rational. And that's what it is to be human, isn't it? Is it? I've seen time and again people say, "Oh, that's just the way I get sometimes," or that's just the way I am, or I don't know what my ADD or OCD brain was thinking. Confuses me sometimes, as if there's an identity that's separate from the mind and these reactions or this activity that we perform in reaction to thoughts that are rapid, thoughts that are disparate, out there in the air, or when we look back at our actions, when we behaved a certain way, when we were disloyal, or we were aggressive, we were mean, or we were annoyed. Even being annoyed seems to be something that most people think is outside of their control, or that their urges are outside of their control, their sexual responses. Looking at a girl's butt, something as simple as that. We sometimes blame it on them. Oh, they shouldn't have been wearing that, or oh, that's just human to look, or oh, I'm a guy. Things like that. As if there is no agency. As if the mind will do what it will, and we just can't control it. Or we have these urges and we have to respond to them. There's no way we can get around them. I think that these reactions and these thought processes are irresponsible. And I say that for myself as well, when I do any of these things as well. As human beings, we know our limitations. We know that while we have these thinking minds, while we have this ability to use logic, to use understanding, to properly assess situations, to perform remarkable tasks, using our minds, using our brains, that animals cannot do. And animals are very much tied to their emotions, very much tied to their urges. We often view it that being human is being bound to a certain set of reactions or actions or thought processes that are just beyond our control. I think it's irresponsible of us. And the way that we move forward is accepting that we have agency over our minds, over our reactions, even over our emotions. I'll notice to this day that, something will happen and it'll make me very sad or annoyed. And I will step back from myself. I think we can all do this. And I'll see myself being sad, see myself being annoyed. And I know that I can control it. That I have agency over myself, over my mind, over my thoughts, over my actions. Yet, it just feels like I'm in the back seat. The soul is in a backseat to the consciousness. The consciousness does not have to be, the conscious mind does not have to be in a backseat to the mind, to emotion. What we as human beings have to realize is that the conscious mind, our consciousness, can take the wheel from emotions, from urges, from the reactions that come forth from our being. We can take the wheel at any time. We have so many thoughts as human beings, just so many thoughts. 50,000 a day, I think, is the average. I think that it's more. I did see a study, multiple studies that said it was 50,000 a day. Might be more, might be less. And a remarkable portion of those are negative thoughts, thoughts that are not optimistic, that are pessimistic, that are doubtful of our abilities. And a lot of these thoughts are justifications for our lack of inserting our will into controlling ourselves, into controlling our very thinking. Whether it doesn't have to be just actions, but, oh, this happened, and then I get sad, and then, oh, there's this chain of thoughts that we go through. Or I get annoyed, and there's this chain of thoughts. Or when I get annoyed, I am short with people. And I think that most of us just assume that that's just how it is. We have agency within our minds. We are not what our brain does, but our brain will do many things. It will react in a number of ways that are very predictable unless we enforce our agency within our own minds. You don't even have to be a spiritual person. While I refer to spirituality often in my videos and in this video as well, you don't even have to be a spiritual person. Delay is the best medicine for anger. I think it was a Stoic who said that. But delay is the best medicine for a number of reactions. But what separates us from animals is that we do have control over our minds. The minds of animals, of cats and dogs, for instance, they are a series of sensations. And a series of sensations that kind of lead to reactions in the body, reactions in the brain chemistry. And this is how our brains will behave, like animals, like a dog, like a cat, unless we take control of it. And while meditation helps quite a bit in doing this and being able to do this, and it isn't the only way that we can do this. We can choose to take control over our thoughts, and then thoughts lead to actions. We must understand that our brain is our domain. It is the only realm that we are entitled to conquer in its entirety. Yet it seems to be the only one that we wish to not exert our will in. We want to exert our will into the world, to control situations around us, so that those situations will produce within us a set of pleasant reactions, pleasant urges, pleasant thoughts. and we imagine if we get this, we get that, then that will produce pleasantness within us, but that is not how it works. In order to achieve a state or an ability to achieve a state of experiencing pleasantness, whatever you want to call it, happiness, joy, and for it to be something that can be reproduced without the quote-unquote necessary set of circumstances outside of ourselves, we have to choose to think. We have to choose to not complain, even inside ourselves, to not be annoyed, to not react, to not eat something that we know is bad for us just because it smells good and we're like, I really want that. You don't need to, that doesn't need to be the chain of events. We can control the chain of events within ourselves. We are not what the brain does. But most people, and myself included, a lot of the time, we just feel like just my brain doing what it will. The mind, the brain, the urges, all these things that I've been talking about, they will be and are predictable. What is unpredictable is exactly what gives us free will, or at least gives us some control over our state of being, which is something that everybody should want. It is often said in the Eastern spiritual sciences or yogic sciences that we can't choose, we don't have free will necessarily, that we can't choose what we desire per se. We can choose what we like. We can't choose, maybe we can't even choose our reactions, but we can choose what we like. What that means is we can choose what signifies what is a pleasant experience or a not pleasant experience based on how we frame it within our minds. Unlike animals, we have language and we have an understanding that of the segments of the mind, emotions, what we think of as truth, what we can or can't do mentally. A basic understanding of psychology exists within all of us if we have at least some basic language and we have a little bit of perception about what's going on around us. And with that basic understanding, we can choose to frame everything that happens to us in a certain light, a positive light or a negative light, or all the spectrum in between. We don't have to be the reaction that is knee-jerk, that is instantaneous when something happens, when something bad happens, when you get into a wreck. Something that's very, less subtle than what I'm talking about in general here. You can choose to think, okay, well, immediately after, I'm going to handle this situation. I'm going to stop, pull off to the side of the road, or get out, make sure I'm okay, make sure everybody in the car's okay, make sure they're okay, exchange insurance. Most people will think, oh man, how much is this going to cost? How much is my insurance going to go up? What was I thinking? How could I be so stupid? We immediately start thinking of the past and start criticizing ourselves. And that self-criticism is usually just a justification for a deeper choice to be sad, to be mad, to be outraged at ourselves or somebody else. But neither has to happen. We can say, okay, I will handle this situation and I will figure out what I did wrong and I won't do it again. You don't have to look in the rear view mirror all the time. That's not a good analogy to mix with this one, because when I'm talking about the rear view mirror, you don't have to continuously look at your past and judge yourself for it, because you can't change that. You can use the knowledge that you've learned to improve your future. You can use even all the bad reactions that you had to things, even from a second ago. It doesn't have to be from a year ago. It can be from a second ago, 5 seconds ago, 10 seconds ago, 10 minutes ago. Say, I'm not going to do that again. I choose to not do that again. I choose to not react that way again. I choose to learn rather than dwell. And I talked about how dwelling leads to loneliness in my last video. Because when we dwell, and how I'm using the term is, we tend to isolate our world to a set amount of experiences that we have had that lead to certain imaginations about the future that is always colored blue or sad or dim or gray, however you want to call it or name it. We isolate our world based on how we contextualize it, and we limit our world based on how we contextualize it. So we limit our ability to think of something beyond it. So we trap ourselves in a box. We board up the house and become frustrated that we can't get out. We are not what our brains do. Our brains will do things, many things, but we can change that. We can change what our brain does. And at first, if we don't form those good habits of thinking to where they're more ingrained, to where we have a more positive reaction or more productive reaction at the very least, we can at least choose to not make the same mistakes right now. And it takes a whole lot of that before these habits are formed within the mind, within the brain. Believe it or not, thoughts are things. They're very much solidified along synapses, and the connections between the axons and the dendrites between the nerve cells of our brain. When we learn something new, you see these, dendrites going out, these little nodes, and forming more connections to other brain cells. The opposite of that is what we mostly do, which is we choose to not learn and be confined with the connections that we have. Very much like a box we're physically forming within our brains. That does not need to be the case. Sometimes learning is not even necessarily taking in new information, but adding up all the information and choosing in the moment to act differently. That will lead to later connections in the future. You won't make all these good connections and all these good pathways in your brain immediately. You won't. But what you can do is choose in the moment forever. And it takes a lot of will at first, and it takes continuous will. But we do not have to be what our brains do. We are the consciousness of our minds is a step back from our the consciousness of our brains is a step back from our mind, and the soul is a step back from that. It's watching everything. If you really tune in, you can feel your soul. If you kind of tune in, you can be fully conscious. You can take your consciousness and you can wield it like a tool rather than a hostage that the mind takes around as it reacts to various things in the external world, or various memories, or various stimuli. We are not what our brains do. Choose to be more. It starts with choosing, then it becomes better habits, and then you choose better and better until your entire life is far more pleasant. Choose pleasantness by not giving up agency to the mind untamed. Thank you very much for watching. Like this video, feel free to leave a comment, share this wherever you like, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day.